I'm back in the Cayenne Coupe GTS. We just did a video on the base version, and I promised we would talk about what it would be like to have this all tarted up. So here we go. Everybody gets all hot and bothered for the tooth of the hound, or the hound's tooth seats. This fabric tweed that makes me feel like I need to be at the golf club, and I get that it really does break up the interior. And the fact that you don't have leather here, you don't have Alcantara, it definitely tends to breathe a bit more and adds that touch of class you're looking for. The grab handles and the headliner in this trim is also fully adorned with the smoothest, most luxurious texture. Now, part of that is not just there for looks. It also helps to add a sound layer or sound deadening layer to this vehicle. Let's talk about the big addition here. You got $8,000 to spend? Sure you do. You want to get the Burmeister 3D audio system with the Aura 3D engine, which is real-time processing. It is an analyzer that takes a look at all the music you input and then can transform it to give you a better soundstage or widen the soundstage. The Aura 3D settings allow you for multiple adjustment from basically 0 to 9. And on our testing, we basically tested the audio system in two ways. In the pure mode, which is what you're going to want to listen to if you care about sound accuracy. When you look at the charts, the harmonic distortion stays below 1%. Now there's a little bit of spikeage there, but it's generally under 1%. When you use the Aura 3D setting, you want to keep this either at 2 or 1. Otherwise, it destroys the soundstage. It ramps up the bass to the point where it starts to meddle with the mid-range and makes it way more crass sounding. Is it worth $8,000? Well, compared to the bass audio, if you care about sound at all, you definitely want to opt for this. And in a car like this is not a value product. Now let's talk about the other things. The large steering wheel, although it is wrapped in Alcantara here, it feels huge to me. And again, I'm a smaller person, but they've widened the steering wheel because of the gauge cluster is now all screens, and they've widened that out. So that means they need to use a bigger steering wheel so you can see this. This is definitely more suited for somebody that's larger. So if you're taller or wider, you're going to appreciate this cabin space. Much like on the base model, they've gone to all of the capacitive touch center stack, which is a blessing and a curse. It's marred with fingerprints and scratches. Over time, you're going to add more to it, and you really do have to look to interact with a majority of these buttons, which can be a big distraction. Now, they've left the temperature controls and the fan controls physical, which is great. You have a physical rotary knob to kind of interact with the screen so you don't always have to touch it. You have a volume knob or a volume rocker here. So there are a good mix of things here that, how do I put this? Porsche is still trying to declutter the interior by using touch-sensitive controls, but still keeping the physical controls here. Something I just complained about on the Tesla product that removes everything. There's still a good blend, and I really appreciate some of the cleanliness and design. Let's talk about the rest of the interior. All right, we got the entertainment package in the back. What does that mean? I got some Porsche headphones. The audio system is also configured to benefit you if you choose this. So there are tweaks to the 3D EQ, and you have an Android-based automotive tablet here. And it looks like, an Android tablet from about 2.5 years ago. The screen resolution is average. The usability is pretty good. If you've used an Android device, you're going to know exactly how to use this. And they allow you enough flexibility to customize this the way you want, which means once you tether it to something else or a Wi-Fi connection, you can log in your Google account and download pretty much every app that you could possibly want. Like Jack downloaded Gym Fitness Tycoon, where he can work on all his muscles individually. But comfort is great. The headroom isn't completely compromised. Well, that is because you have a carbon roof. But still, even if you did have some glass here, there's no issue with sitting back here for long periods of time. Now, the hatch space. It's a little bit compromised because of the coupe shape, but many people like this because they don't need a full-blown hauler, and that's what this delivers. Some of the usability of one while shrinking the dimensions. Now when you look at the back, this has air ride, which gives you the ability to lower the load floor to make this easier to get things in and out. You have the cargo mat accessory, cargo nets, and a rail system. But overall, the usability of this has been excellent for my purposes, and I think most people are going to really appreciate the performance, the usability and comfort that the Cayenne Coupe brings. But let's get this in the shop because there's so much more technical stuff to discuss. Welcome to part 2. We're underneath the Porsche Cayenne Coupe GTS. We just looked at the S variant and we left plenty off the table there in terms of technical details because we knew we'd be looking at this. So what is the GTS?
So the GTS is the driver's car variant in the Cayenne lineup. It is not their fastest Cayenne, but it is their best handling model with the added benefit of the soundtrack of a V8. And the way they've accomplished that is by retuning the entire suspension and all-wheel drive system.
Compared to the regular or lower trim levels?
Yes.
Okay, how does this compare to one of the platform sharing mates, the Audi Q8?
So this is lighter than the Q8, and that's thanks to their aluminum body structure and body panels.
So the body in white is the core shell of the car or SUV, and 30% of the materials used are aluminum. The rest is various types of stamped steel, steels, and all that. So not only do they have 30% aluminum there, but all the hang-on panels or the exterior sheet metal is all aluminum. You add the carbon fiber roof, and they're trying to bring weight down as much as possible. So the body in white, just that part, is around 1,900 pounds on that, which may seem like a lot, but you know, we're talking about a pretty big vehicle here.
So not only is it lighter than the Q8 and SQ8, it is wider and lower, and it has a shorter wheelbase. So all of that aids in handling, and obviously all the suspension systems, and they're a mix of electrical and physical systems on this car, are all unique to the Porsche.
And Porsche spends much of their engineering time on getting chassis tuned, and that is one of the biggest differentiators when you get behind something like this versus some of the competitors where they might not have all the technical know-how. Now, in terms of braking systems, you have 3 different options. You have a standard steel rotor and a 6-piston front caliper. That is the cheapest option and best bet for consumables if you're going to be chewing up brakes. They have their new tungsten carbide coated steel rotor option, which also adds a pesky yet huge 10-piston front caliper. And they make the point of making them white or painted white to show just how little they dust, and that is because the hardness layer of that tungsten carbide sprayed on coating is so hard that the metal or the material, it takes so long for that material to come off that it doesn't dust as much as the steel counterpart. Now, there is a better there's a performance edge to that as well. Brake pedal feel stays more consistent over repetitive braking cycles as temperature gets in them. And of course, you have little things like these kick-ups here to flow air into the dust shield and all that. Then you have the carbon ceramic option, which just adds cost, the initial cost, but the long-term cost of replacement gets insane. And on something like this, it just depends on how much money you want to spend and how long you're going to keep it.
And that's the Porsche philosophy when it comes to this product. And this is something, one of the reasons I respect them as a brand, but at the same time, it's hard to express that to a viewer or a future customer.
Right.
Is value is a term that is not in their wheelhouse, and you have to be okay with that.
Now, in terms of front suspension, it's all forged aluminum connected to an aluminum subframe carrier. You have a multi-link, dual ball joints in the front or lower knuckle, and then all the way on the top you have a dual ball joint in the upper A-arm, and this gives them more flexibility and tuning. You combine that with electronically controlled dampers in the front and air springs. I mean, you're basically changing ride height, you're changing damper rates, flow rates, all of that on the fly. I mean, it's just, there's so much they can do here to transform the driving experience. But is there anything else we need to talk about before we go to the back?
Now let's head to the back, Mark, and flush out those systems in greater detail.
All right, look at all this, Jack. I'm sure there's more to talk about that we didn't cover on the previous Cayenne video.
Yeah, and there are a lot of systems that go into greater depth. So as we talked about in the front, Porsche has a variety of suspension systems, both electrical and mechanical, that attempt to mask this car's weight to make it feel more like a Porsche product, in other words, a sports car. and it does manage that relatively successfully, as we'll talk about in the drive. But here are the systems. You have PASM, which is Porsche's adaptive dampers that work with wheel speed sensors, all other fun stuff to change the various drive modes, which, again, in the GTS are recalibrated when compared to the regular Cayenne S. You have Porsche Air Ride, which are these enormous air bladders back here, allow you to raise and lower the vehicle for your off-road modes, or to lower the trunk, or the load floor when you're loading garbage into this thing. Mm-hmm. You have PDCC, which is Porsche's, basically, they have a 48-volt system that allows you to modulate the sway bars to reduce roll.
Yeah, so you have an active sway bar here, and that applies torque to what looks like a traditional sway bar to stiffen as needed to reduce the roll characteristics of certain corners.
And allows you to keep them soft so you don't completely trash the ride of this vehicle.
Right.
Like you get in, say, an X3M, which rides like you're falling down a flight of stairs. You also get Porsche torque vectoring with this all-wheel drive system, which has, again, been recalibrated from the regular Cayenne Coupe. So the regular Cayenne Coupe, Cayenne S, in turbo have like a 80-20 split, which is different than what you get on a regular MLB architecture. However, for the Cayenne GTS, it is even further rear biased. It is the only Cayenne model that has this split.
What is it, like 84 or something?
I think it's, from what I understand, this is what my Porsche rep told me, it's like 85 or close to that, 15. So it's largely rear biased.
And it is a rear wheel drive architecture first, but this is giving you the most rear biased feel, combined with the rear steering module, which is tied to something else. Is that another Porsche patented driving system?
So with the rear steer, it allows you to turn the car basically easier in a parking lot. But when you get up to speed, it'll toe in a little bit to make the car feel smaller. But they've then connected the rear steer module with the front steering to allow for what Porsche calls 15% greater directness when compared to the prior generation Cayenne. So they've taken, obviously this is an all-new Cayenne. We already talked about that in the prior video, but they've taken little bits in every single element of this vehicle from a suspension setup to try to maximize it.
I mean, I guess I would need to drive something like this with everything stripped off to see the true before and after, because to me this seems like over-engineering on every single level. But,
like we talked about in the last video though, I mean, I know we haven't taken this GTS out yet, but in the Cayenne Coupe S, that thing was probably...
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, and I guess I'm just I'm thinking about it as we're talking, and I think most people are going to realize this. Holy crap, do you need all this? It's adding all this complexity and cost. What does it really do?
It makes you win, Mark.
Yeah, it makes you win on the streets. But let's take a look under the hood and check out the engine bay.
All right, Mark.
Under the hood, there's not much to look at here but plastic covers. I can't even see inside here, and that is partly by design. There is a ton of engineering that goes into airflow, because this is a very hot engine bay, so they need heat dissipation. Also aerodynamics. This is one of the first cars or first SUVs that can close every single shutter. They have active shutters across all the heat exchangers. And why do they do that, Jack?
So you can maximize miles per gallon on the highway. When the car is running at highway speeds, they can shut all of the openings to reduce drag.
Okay. Let's talk about the engines, Jack. There's so many. I don't know why there's so many, but let's go over them.
So this is the 4-liter twin-turbo V8, which was produced solely by Porsche. However, you can get a variant of this in the Audi products, but This was a Porsche-led project. This is the GTS drivetrain. Because this is the same motor that you get in the turbo, they've decreased its PSI to make it more driver's car-y.
Okay, so it's like 11 pounds of boost.
From 18.8.
Okay, so the engine up makes more boost, more torque, but this is only a minimal amount more horsepower than the 2.9 liter, correct?
It's about 10 to 20 more horsepower than the 2.9 liter V6, however, about 50 foot-pounds more in torque. And then the all-wheel drive system's been changed and all that other fun stuff.
So you're really getting more torque in the V8 sound. That's the main thing you're getting out of this. But the core of this is to move up to the next level, which is what?
A version of this that has 18 pounds of boost, which makes about 550 horsepower. Then past that, you have the Cayenne Turbo S E-Hybrid, which makes like 670 horsepower. So basically, the sky's the limit, and like McDonald's, you can have it your way.
Yeah, it's crazy. So there's a lot of options here. I think we could sit here and talk about the specs and all the engineering. We're going to get this out on the road and kind of talk about how it drives.
All right, Mark.
You got me in the houndstooth stuff getting lattes. We're back in another Cayenne Coupe. This is the baller edition. Yes. I don't know if that's the trim level.
Oh, it is. That's what GTS translates to in German as baller. No, this is the Cayenne GTS Coupe, and this is supposed to be Porsche's sporty or more drivers-focused Cayenne variant, which means, as we talked about in the shop, the all-wheel drive system's been recalibrated. The suspension tuning's different, and you have a twin-turbo 4-liter V8.
I'm liking the sound of it, but what does that translate into?
It translates into more power and a more rear-driven driving dynamic.
So let's talk a little bit about the differences between the 6-cylinder version and this. A lot of this feels very similar. Obviously, this is tarted up. There's more money injected here from the suede headliner, carbon roof. But what is it like to drive?
I'm going to be honest. Very similar, almost identical. And in some ways, I think the regular Cayenne Coupe S that we had was so good to drive. I don't think the extra money and the extra power is necessarily warranted, particularly if you're the kind of buyer who can blow, I think this is like 165 on an SUV, you probably already have a GT3 or a 911 Turbo. You bought this to be your hauler, and you bought this to be your hauler, which means I don't know if the 100 horsepower is warranted. Is this better driving? Is this faster than the Cayenne Coupe S? Yes. The chassis, as it's been retuned a little bit, rides stiffer, and you can carry a lot of speed in corners. It's about to demonstrate. And it feels great.
It feels to me, when I first got in it, and we had this discussion, I wasn't quite sure if somebody had put regular gas in here, because it felt so similar to the 6-cylinder we drove in terms of power that we ran a tank through. We put, now there's 93 octane in here. I just feel like, aside from the sound, you're not getting so much more out of here. I think the regular Cayenne Coupe that we drove was so good that I think this is just adding a little bit more. I thought it was going to be like doubling the excitement, and it's adding more stuff, but it still feels very good. I would say that I prefer the softer suspension.
In an SUV like this, and I'm going to agree with you, I don't necessarily see the value in having a stiffer suspension. You could track this. You won't,
right? Yeah.
But you could.
Yeah.
And the slightly different or the more rear bias calibration in the all-wheel drive system, does it make it drive better? Sure,
a little bit. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
But on your day-to-day commute to work, are you going to notice that on a Cloverleaf? Probably not. And that's where I'm going to leave that from a driving characteristic. The motor's great. It makes good power. It sounds good. The center exit exhaust gets me all weak and hot and bothered.
Yeah.
And it does sound good. It burbles and cracks.
The engine does sound good, but it's still more muted. It's got a V8 tonal quality. It's got that warmth to it, but it is very refined. And again, you throw turbos on anything, this is the side effect.
And you have all this sound deadening, because at the end of the day, this is a luxury good. Correct. And a luxury product. I do think, and I will say this again, like we said in the last video on the Cayenne, if you have the money, this is the best SUV you can buy. Not value-based,
right?
But it does everything well. It's probably engineered the best. It has the best drivetrains, the best everything.
The best SUV coupe you could get.
I would, to be honest, I'd still probably get the regular Cayenne. It makes more sense, but it's the best SUV, but it's the most money, I guess. And if you can afford it and you can deal with all the associated running costs and you don't care and you just want to be a winner, you want to be the best, this is what you buy. And I stand by that.
Yeah, this is just more, again, if you want to know more about this, check out our regular Cayenne Coupe video that we just did, the 6-cylinder version. We go into a lot more in depth with suspension and all that, but this is just like that 10-15% more added on. And I think that's a good time to get into the final thoughts, Jack.
All right.
Final thoughts on the Porsche Cayenne Coupe GTS. This is the end of part 2. Big thanks to Luke for providing all of the technical and engineering information. And I think whether you're in the market for this car or not, whether you like it, at least for me, I have a much better appreciation for how much effort and how much they've baked into cars like this. It's just mind-blowing and mind-numbing at the same time. So let's get into the pros and the cons. The base GTS is $106,000. The one we tested is $162,000. It's incredible how much you can tack on here. Things like the performance package or sports package is $10,000. The Burmeister audio is $7,000. The thermal night vision camera is $3,400 or thereabouts, and the fabric on the grab handles, the race text, is a $1,300 option. I mean, you could go on and on and on, and this is where Porsche gets out of control in terms of cost. But when you strip all this stuff away, one of the main reasons I loved the Cayenne Coupe S so much is all the fundamentals are still there in terms of drivetrain, suspension, and chassis. So it doesn't matter if you spend the base amount around 100 grand or all the way up to 180 plus when you get the hybrid or the higher end V8, you're still getting good drivability, and that's something that you lose on a lot of the more budget cars. Like if you get a stripper RAV4 or a CRV or something with front wheel drive only, typically you have to go up a couple trim levels before you get good drivability, and that's not the case with the Cayenne Coupe S. That is the main takeaway of driving this. I think I favor the Cayenne Coupe S with the 2.9 liter 6-cylinder versus the V8. I think it feels more natural. The air ride suspension without forcing it to be more sporty feels way better to drive. And Jack made this point, if you're buying something like this, chances are this is your daily driver, and you're gonna have a sports car as a second car, so you don't need this to be everything, but you can do that, and you're gonna pay dearly for that. So the last part to talk about is you really have to value what Porsche is bringing to the table here, all of this engineering and technology. If you don't appreciate the suspension design and all the work they put into the chassis and the steering and the drivetrain, you're just throwing your money away. I'm just being honest. You can get a better hauler for half the price. But if you put a value on this, or you want the Porsche marquee and all of that heritage that comes along with it, you're going to appreciate this more than anything else because there's a lot of work that goes into it. Now, the main argument I see from people is why a SUV or crossover coupe? It makes no sense at all, and I have to agree, but you got to understand from a business perspective, these companies are following the money, and it's not like Porsche's cheaping out. They're putting everything they have into this, but when you look at their sales numbers, 911 or the 718 compared to their SUVs, they're minuscule. And if all they did was make sports cars, enthusiast cars, they'd be out of business, or they'd have serious financial strain. So you got to go with volume movers. So you still have the money and you have all of that resources to put into the sports cars. This is the ongoing joke. You got to follow what pays the bills. It's no different in real life. And that's one of the reasons the Cayenne Coupe exists. Not going to say anything other than that. I think you can make your own decision. If you want it, take it for a test drive. It's amazing, really. The overall package is amazing. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.